Um, Perfect. Okay, so as you already told, I'm Jonathan Kyle Hobson, and this presentation is really all about teaching you guys how to fish with prompting and ChatGPT and language learning models, which is what ChatGPT is. And so you can scan this QR code that has my full slides with also my full presentation and speech as well. It's ADHD friendly, and you can scan that we'll go to a link tree, or you can access the full slides on Figma. This will be available to you in the chat as well as at the end of the presentation, so you can always scan later or grab those later as well. So I have 10 years as a filmmaker, telling stories. I really love telling stories. My main mission in life is to harmonize technology with humans, and I recently transitioned into UX. I've been using AI ever since ChatGPT 3 released for about more than a year now. I use it for everything. I use it for cooking. I use it for troubleshooting Figma. I use it to help brainstorm and come up with new ideas. It's my daily assistant. I also use it to summarize articles, videos, etc. It's like go-to assistant. And so I use AI for a lot of things, which we'll get into here in a second. You can access my full references with this QR code, which again will be available in the chat. And you can also access it later at the end of the slideshow. I'm not going to stay here for very long, but we can always go back to it later. But these are AI thought leaders that I follow. Dave Shapiro. These are people that I follow in the AI world, and they're really, really great for staying up to date on what's happening as this industry moves really incredibly fast. Developments are happening every day, and so spending a little time each week with one of these content creators is amazing idea to stay up to date with the information I'm giving you. And so just we'll do a brief understanding so we're all on the same page of different definitions. So ChatGPT is a generative artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is designed to mimic human intelligence. And ChatGPT is designed to create new content, like text specifically with ChatGPT. But DALL-E 3 can do images. They're also called language learning models, which is what ChatGPT is, an LLM, a language learning model designed to be around the human language. To understand the human language. And so ChatGPT, like humans, creates patterns and relationships between words, and then uses those relationships and patterns to answer your questions or predict what you're trying to achieve based on your input. And prompting is what we'll be kind of talking about in this slideshow, and it's the act of trying to achieve the output you want to achieve. That's what prompt engineering is. And so I personally believe that we're currently in a major tipping point, an AI revolution. And there's been many revolutions throughout human history, but they've all spanned only generations or decades. But currently, we're in a revolution that's spanning months. So that's kind of the urgency that I want you guys to take away from this slideshow, is that AI is potentially going to revolutionize our society. And so early studies, early estimates, early surveys, and case studies have shown that using AI-assisted work, AI collaboration can increase output of your quality of your work by 40%, the speed of your work by 25%, and the completeness of 12%. And this is the worst it will ever be at. So if you collaborate with AI well, you can achieve greater output in your productivity. So these are all the things that AI can do, that generative AI, specifically ChatGPT and other LLMs that we'll talk about soon, can achieve. They can do reductive tasks, transformative tasks, and generative tasks. They're great for brainstorming, organizing your thoughts, making hypothesis and predicting outcomes, and you can talk with it back and forth on predictions. You can create with it. You can write essays with it, right? You can write your emails to your stakeholders or your memos. You can use it to assist you with that in a collaborative process. It can also simulate famous authors or people in the industry. It can rewrite content, translate content, not just translating from English to Chinese, for example, but it can also translate between a novice to an expert. It's really good at sending something that you don't understand and giving you metaphor or analogy around it. Language learning models are fascinating at how good they are at metaphor. It can summarize, evaluate, filter. There's so many different things. And so I want to do an exercise. This is a very interactive slideshow presentation. I want you guys to participate in this. And so what I'm calling for this first exercise is something more passive. I don't want you to open up ChatGPT yet. I want you to think about these questions. So I want you to think about your process with a user persona, which I'll get to the definition of that in a second. But your process of a user persona, what is your first thought when you think of a user persona? What is the first thing that comes to mind? What do you instinctively prioritize in that task? And making a user persona and using a persona, you want to ask yourself these questions, right? You want to evaluate what a user persona is. What are questions you've never asked around that task of a user persona? How do you explain this to someone who's unfamiliar of your field, unfamiliar to what a user persona is? And so I want you to ask yourself these questions, and even in the chat, you could even put answers that you thought of or are thinking of as they come to mind. So let's say you don't know what user persona is. If you're new to being a UX designer, new to being a UX researcher, you may have not gotten the foundation of what a user persona is. Well, we can use ChatGPT to help you with this. So in the chat, there'll be a shared link that you can use. You can click on that link, and it will send you to ChatGPT's site, where you'll see my conversation I had about what user persona is, and you can click to continue that conversation and have a continued back and forth with ChatGPT if you want an engaging conversation. And so this prompt right here has ChatGPT put out all the definition of user persona, not just the official user experience definition, but how other stakeholders might interpret it. And you could continue that conversation with this is great if you're going into a stakeholder meeting and you want to present your user persona and you're not sure how your audience is they're going to understand what a user persona is. Well, you could put ChatGPT in the role of their shoes and have them have a conversation with that stakeholder and find out with ChatGPT if they'll understand what a user persona is and how to explain it to them in their terminology, how to explain it to your stakeholder. And so as we went through these questions, right, these different questions, you can also have ChatGPT help you go through these questions. So on this slide, there'll be another link shared in the chat, which you can click on and you can kind of see my conversation. There's more to this prompt than what you see here. I did a 2-paragraph prompt, and this prompt is designed to lead you through those questions that I talked about before, 10 questions, and through the 5 why techniques. This is a prompt you can get ChatGPT to help you with, to help you think about a process, a task. How do you do that task? Understanding that task. And this is a resource that's not just important for prompting, but important no matter what. In general, anything you're doing, you should really have a strong understanding of it, because oftentimes when you become an expert in something, the process of doing it becomes instinctual, and you almost forget the minute steps you took to get there, and you forget those steps that just become subconscious to you, become auto drive. And so these exercises, the 5 why techniques, the Socrates questioning, and some of the questions I asked you are designed to kind of unwrap your process, unwrap your understanding. And you can use ChatGPT to help you with that. So through all my year of prompting, it's almost become natural to me, or intuitive. Just like I was saying, I almost forgot the process I took to write prompts, because I've done it so much that it became an instinctual process for me. And so for this presentation, I had to sit down and think, okay, what is the process I go through? And I did those same steps for figuring out this process I go through to prompt. And this is my generic workflow that I go through when I go to sit down in front of an LLM, in front of ChatGPT, in front of Pi, and I go to try to get them to do something for me. This is a generic workflow that I go through. And the first thing I do is I do context gathering. This involves not only figuring out what context there is to gather, but also how I'm going to curate that data, how I'm going to curate context. And this exercise was all about figuring out that context, figuring out what context is needed, figuring out what user persona means to other people. And this is not something you have to go through every single time. You may already know that context. You may already have it instinctual, right? But the context gathering is really important for establishing what the topic is that you're going to talk to with ChatGPT. What is a user persona? Aligning definitions, expectations, context, creating And creating an initial persona requires an understanding of what a persona is. Research, audience, discovery, and data synthesis are all ways you can gather context, which I'll go into more detail. But this is a generic workflow, and we'll come back to this throughout the presentation. Now, there's many different ways to gather context and to input your context. Right? You can deliver context to ChatGPT, to an LLM, to a language learning model through keywords you use, key terminologies, right? Like user experience, user persona, user journey. Keywords that we use in our industry, right, are keywords you can use in your prompt to tune ChatGPT towards your goal, to tune ChatGPT towards your destination. As ChatGPT is built up of billions of data sets, it's like talking to thousands of experts at once. And if you go to a large room and just start initially talking and without any context with people, they're not going to know what you're talking about. Your physicist is going to come up and be like, what is a user persona? Or I don't know what, to me, that means this, right? And so everyone's going to have different definitions, which we'll go into more detail later. So end goal is another way to deliver context. Having a goal in your prompt, showing, hey, this is what I'm trying to achieve. This is the outcome, which we'll go into more later. But establishing an end goal is really great. Examples are really great, right? You got to be careful with examples, though. You have to denote what is an example and what isn't, because ChatGPT can get confused if you just throw in examples with no clear definition of what an example, that this is an example. It can get convoluted in what you're trying to ask for. So, but examples are a great way to get ChatGPT to you can paste in an example of a user persona, and then just information and research. And you'll see some of the chats that I share that I've pre-established them with a pre-conversation of research and information. And I call that personally, I don't know if this is an official coined term, but I call it priming. This is where you kind of have a conversation with ChatGPT or provide research and kind of talk about the definition of user persona, do it in multiple conversations, and you prime ChatGPT for what you're about to talk about or what you're about to request. So it's not a one-off situation, it's a collaborative process. And then act as a simulate is a great way to start your prompt off, especially if you're not knowledgeable in that industry. If I'm doing something with law, then I may need to say, act as a lawyer with 30 years of experience, or act as a doctor with 30 years of experience. Simulate Socrates, or simulate a philosopher with 40 years of experience, right? So you can set up, you can prime ChatGPT by acting as something, and that's telling it the expert to be. That's telling it who to be. That's telling it the destination you're trying to go for. It's giving it context, and context is really important. And you can deliver your context in different ways. And all these different methods of delivering context can help you choose which LLM to use, which service to use. There's a variety of services out here. Here are some of the popular ones that are free to everyone. ChatGPT does have a pro version, but there's also a free version. Bard is not that great right now, but that could change any second now because Google's working on some incredible stuff. Pi is really good for conversational things. It's really set up for conversations, great for brainstorming, great for simulating an interview. If you're about to have an interview, you can go into Pi and say, hey, I'm really anxious about this interview. Can I get some help? And it will lead you through that. It's automatically primed for that. It's automatically primed for mental health support. So Pi is a free resource that's really great for organizing thoughts, for thinking things through. I go to Pi for researching topics, for uncovering what I'm currently studying in my UX design class. I go over it and I think about it and I go over UX patterns, and Pi is a really great partner, really great collaborative partner. Claude is another one that's kind of like ChatGPT. It also has a free and pro version. It's really great at large context windows, large token windows. So I'll go into it more later, but LLMs have a limit with a short-term memory. They can only remember so much before they start forgetting your conversation. And the Claude has the biggest window out of all of them. So if you're going to have to read a big PDF, a big document, Claude is your go-to. Other people like Claude because it's an academic focus, but I like ChatGPT better. It's more diverse. Within those models, there's sometimes different types of models within them. So if you're paying for the pro version of ChatGPT, you got all different kinds of models you can choose from, which are more options to deliver your context, right? So you have the browsing option where you can have ChatGPT browse the internet for you to make sure your facts are accurate, to make sure that what it's saying is accurate, right? You can also provide context that way. You can say, hey, ChatGPT, go on to the browse what user persona is. What is user persona? And you can use the browsing function, and it can go online and search for what user persona is without accessing its training data, so your information is guaranteed to be more accurate. And advanced data analysis, I won't go into what that is now, but it can do files, it can do Excel files, it can create you data visualization, it can create you bar graphs, and etc. Plugins are great for all purpose of things. I use them to browse the web. In some, they're better at browsing the web than browse with Bing in many circumstances. But you can find plugins for your specific use case, and you can find ones that you like. And plugins can be a wide range of stuff. I won't go into that too much here. DALL-E 3 can generate images. And if you download my full slideshow, you can see different types of image generators that are available, AI image generator, art generators, which are tremendous. We won't get into that in this slideshow, but DALL-E 3 can generate images through conversation. And you can generate ideas, logos, mock-ups of things that you're trying to think about. You can visualize your thoughts. Really useful. So here's an example of why context is so important. And I already kind of talked about this a little bit, but context is important because what we talked about, this subconscious mind is interpreted by so many different people by so many different ways. Not only do different experts interpret subconscious mind differently, but different religions interpret it differently, different people interpret it differently. So this prompt is a bad prompt because it gives no idea of what subconscious mind is, what's referring to there, what expert is it talking to, right? And then the whole AI thing, ChatGPT's latest has been pushed to 2022 just recently in the last week. But before that, it was limited to 2021. And so it wouldn't necessarily know the whole AI currently happening, the whole AI thing that's currently happening with LLMs. It doesn't necessarily know that by default because it's not in its training data. So it might think you're talking about Facebook's AI with predicting ads. So it's a very vague reference, outdated training, very vague reference. And so it's not, I'm pointing at the screen over here. Sorry. So it's not very up to date. So there's a lot of things wrong with this prompt, and we'll go into more of that in a second. So we're getting into our next exercise. And this exercise is we're going to have ChatGPT create us a user persona for an audience. Now we're going to start out with this prompt, but I'm not going to say anything right now to a spoiler. I'm not going to spoil anything for us. But we'll start out with this prompt. It will be shared in the chat. Also, a conversation will be shared in the chat as well. That new conversation link goes to something I already started with this prompt. And so you can either start up a new conversation with this prompt, or you can go off of what I started. If you go to that link, you can always scroll down and click continue conversation, and you should be able to open up a fresh conversation where you can continue my conversation that I started. But I wonder if anybody can tell me what's wrong with this prompt. Can anybody pop in the chat and say, hey, what's wrong with this prompt? Give a few seconds. 1,000, 2, 1,000. Okay, we're going on. Okay, so just like that prompt, is this a bad or good prompt? Yeah, too vague, exactly. And the same with this one. Is this a bad or good prompt? Is what UX improvements can be made to this page? This is something that's been trending on LinkedIn in the last couple of weeks. And people, they use this in a case study, and ChatGPT was very didn't give them the results necessarily that they were looking for. And this is no goal provided. This is a bad prompt because there's no goal provided, right? Yeah, undefined scope. There's also clarity on what UX means. I meet people all the time who don't know what UX means. I meet people all the time. Yes, UX has a standard definition of user experience, but why are you assuming that the AI knows that's what you mean, right? Why are you assuming that? It's like a human, just like you're talking to an intern or assistant. You should reduce the cognitive load of the AI by typing out user experience. There's no way to have that extra cognitive load for the AI itself. You can confuse the prompt. You can make it not function as well. And same with improvements. What kind of improvements? What are we talking about? What does improvements mean to that person? What does improvements? So you're leaving it up to the ChatGPT to determine that, which can be beneficial. You can use that to your advantage sometimes. There's sometimes where I strategically leave out context in prompts on purpose because I want ChatGPT's interpretation. But this case, it's not going to work for you. It's not going to give you what you want. So this is an improved version of that. an improved version of that. I did actually have a chat. I don't think I gave. Yeah, there was a chat of this I could have shared, but I forgot to grab that link at the end. I could probably share it with you guys at the end. But this is an improved version of that, and based on Jakob Nielsen's 10 usability heuristics. So now we have what improvements mean. Now we have what improvements mean, and we understand what improvements is, right? We understand that improvements we understand what improvements is. Improvements is the 10 usability heuristics. We now have list actionable improvements, not just any old improvement. We want actionable improvements. We now want enhanced, we now know we want enhanced visual appeal, functionality, and user interaction. Before that was unclear. Before there was no definition that we wanted improved user interaction. And so there was no understanding there. Now we know it's a landing page. We know it's a home page now. Before, ChatGPT didn't know that. It didn't know what kind of page it was. It could have been a gaming tabletop role-playing page for all it knew. It didn't know. And now we know it's an e-commerce website. And I recommend this is an improved prompt because this prompt still isn't perfect. This prompt is still a collaborative process. It still isn't done. There's more context that could be added. And now, what someone mentioned before, there was no goal. Now we have a goal. Now our goal is to increase user engagement. I would personally recommend doing more of a goal. There isn't enough of a goal. And consider the target audience. Now it asks for a target audience, insert that user persona, which we're about to make, right? So we get through all this process. Now we have an improved prompt that gives an audience, gives what we mean by different things, right? And you can see up here, priming. You want to prime the conversation, get it ready for this prompt. This is not the one go thing. This is a collaborative process. You want to continue the conversation, continue having a conversation with it. Okay, there we go. So then we're back at this prompt right here. Everyone did this prompt. Did everybody have any questions around this prompt? If anybody has any questions at any time, you can submit questions at any time with any of these exercises, and I can answer them. Yeah, sorry, I was just reading in the chat. Okay, perfect. So yeah, this prompt, if you guys have done this prompt, you can share what your results were if you want. You can share your conversation. In the upper right-hand corner is a little share button. You can click that, share a conversation. It will automatically share it as anonymous unless you click share name. Then you can put that conversation in the chat if you want and show people what you did. So this is the improved version of that. So this is our improved version right here. So here, this improved version, still not perfect. We now identify what our audience is more specifically. We can still do a lot better. If you look at the shared link in the chat, you can see that I gave a way more defined. I did a lot more to define the audience. I defined the audience as Tiny Chef audience, busy students who like Tiny Chef, right? So there's a lot more you can provide here. But now we define what kind of platform we're talking about. What kind of online platform are we talking about? E-learning and professional development. Before our old prompt, that wasn't there. We didn't define online platforms. So now we do that. We also say we want detailed. I always use the keywords thorough, comprehensive, detailed. Those are really powerful keywords. Thorough yet concise. Something that I feel like a broken record sometimes because I'm always saying thorough and concise. And it's cut off for me a little bit. So yeah, we say we want challenges, motivations, and goals, and we want to we tell kind of what we want. And if you can look at the conversation, the link I shared, you can see that that I really break down what I'm looking for. I break down a format of what I'm looking for, and based on the definition that we got from user persona earlier, I break that down and I add that to this prompt. Are there any questions at this point? You can submit questions to the Q&A, or you can submit them in the chat. So LLMs, language learning models, ChatGPT, Pi, whatever you're using, they have limitations. They have quite a few limitations. They're not perfect. They're a new tech. Experts don't even know what's inside their black box. Their black box, even experts are to an extent, if you talk to people who work in this industry, who deal with LLMs, a part of what LLM, the magic behind them, isn't programmed in the natural way. It's learned through patterns, just like the human mind, in a sense, learns patterns. So these LLMs have black boxes of like about a million different relationships of words, different matrices of words, where it decided on its own that these words make sense together, that these words form a pattern, and we don't fully understand what's happening inside of that. But as an effect of that, there are certain limitations. So one of those is the short-term memory, which you talked about. It's called token limit. This is the fact that as you go on in the conversation, it might forget what happens in the beginning of the conversation. Response length, sometimes ChatGPT likes to talk too much. Sometimes it likes to not talk enough. So kind of understanding that can help you as you learn about these, and as you practice with prompting, you can learn these limitations and learn workarounds, which we'll go over in a second, and learn how to use them to your advantage. Hallucinations, another one. Hallucinations is the tendency of LLM models to give inaccurate information, and we can circumvent that with context. That's why context is so important. But there's also other ways to use hallucinations to your advantage. Hallucinations can be a powerful tool. So think back to that user persona. Now, on your chat, or the chat that I did, you would see that it hallucinated to create that information. We wouldn't have been able to do this prompt if it wasn't for that hallucination function. That hallucination function is a feature, not a bug, if used properly. If you give it the right context, if you're aware that it could be inaccurate, and you circumvent with strategically, then you can use hallucinations as a feature. Now, someone asked what methods could be deployed to ensure that AI-generated prompts align with the overall user experience strategy. And we already talked about how context is really important in that. But we'll go over some other tools you can use as well, because you can use these limitations to inspire creativity and to inspire collaboration. For example, the token limit, the short-term memory constraint, is utilized by Pi to encourage back and forth conversation, to encourage you to talk with it and discuss with it, and encourage you to participate. Pi, for example, won't write you an essay. If you asked it to write you an essay or a poem, instead it will just start asking you questions about it and be like, oh, what kind of poem do you want? Oh, well, how long do you want the poem? It'll ask you questions over and over again. You have to kind of get angry at it and be like, no, I just want you. And then eventually it'll write something, but it won't be that great because Pi is not designed for that. So these limitations can fuel conversation. Someone else asked, I'm going to read out loud. I may not answer these questions right away, but I will get to them if I don't get to them right away. But how many hours would you estimate you spent learning the black box chat API interface? I'll have to come back to that. So another method that can be employed to ensure AI generated prompts align with your values is editing. Editing is crucial. Collaborative process is crucial to the whole process. So apple picking and accordion editing are UX terms coined by the Norman Group, coined by Jacob Nielsen. They coined accordion editing and apple picking, and this is great for outside of prompting as UX designers. These will be terms that you might hear in the future as terms of how users interact with AI. And accordioning is when you ask ChatGPT to shorten something or lengthen something. It's the process of having ChatGPT edit for you, requesting ChatGPT change something, requesting ChatGPT to make this longer, to make this more concise, to make it more brief, right? And another great example that I actually want to bring up with context is the difference between the word brief and the word concise. Can anybody tell me what the difference between the word brief and the word concise is? I'll jump the gun. So brief tells ChatGPT that you're okay with losing information. Concise tells it that you're not necessarily okay with losing information, that you want to try to keep the same information there. Concise has a meaning of like trying to keep this short, but with the information still intact. While if you said short or brief, ChatGPT would probably would remove information from what you're trying to say. more easily. So you would lose meaning. So concise yet thorough is very selected on purpose for me as keywords, because it's telling ChatGPT that I want to try to make this more condensed without losing meaning. While if I said make this brief, while I need to say this brief, make this brief, yeah, exactly. Someone said concise is compressed, brief is limited. And if I said make this brief, then ChatGPT would remove information more easily, or probably would do that. Same with short. If I said make this more shorter, then it might do that as well. Apple picking is where you pick pieces of ChatGPT's conversation, and you can do that. You can go through ChatGPT's conversation and utilize small little pieces. You're not stuck to utilizing what it output. You can utilize whatever you want. So then other methods that we can use to ensure that ChatGPT aligns with our value, aligns with our user experience strategy, especially if you're paying for the pro version, is custom instructions. Now, my custom instructions are very generalized, but this is a powerful tool to ensure that ChatGPT is aligning with what you want. So you can write in how you want ChatGPT to respond, and you can also write in what you want ChatGPT to know about you, and you can make sure that ChatGPT aligns with your mission, aligns with who you are, aligns and knows about you. And every instruction that you give ChatGPT, every prompt you give ChatGPT, it reads these custom instructions and aligns that prompt with these custom instructions. So you don't have to write out a whole bunch of context every time. If you're using ChatGPT for one specific use case, then you can set up these custom instructions ahead of time, and then a shortcut. It could be a great way to do that short-term memory restriction, right? The short-term memory restriction. You can put in things you want to remember constantly here, and you can override that short-term memory restriction. You can also use the edit function. So on ChatGPT, there's a little edit button. You can click that. I think you can do it on the free version, and you can edit your prompt. Let's say you made a mistake, you forgot to add context, you want to go back. This is also a great way to override that short-term memory limitation, because you can go back in the conversation and rewrite something earlier in the conversation and take advantage of that earlier portion of the conversation. And so editing your past responses is a great way to redo the conversation, because every time ChatGPT responds to you, it will be a different response. There are subtle things over time that you'll learn ChatGPT does frequently based on its training data. The few things that I see repeated, but pretty much every time you regenerate that response, you get a different response. If you don't like it the first time, you can keep doing it. So then after you've successfully, gotten your user persona, you have your user persona you made with all our prompts that we talked about, you want to have some way of evaluating ChatGPT's responses, ensuring they align with your values, ensuring they align with the overall user experience strategy. You want to ensure that that's the case. And so ASU, Andrew Maynard, invented this framework called RACA. It's an official ASU framework, and this is a condensed version of it that I have here, condensed version of it. But you want to ensure that I'm not going to read these to you, but you want to ensure that your output aligns with your values. And I think if you have my full slideshow, you'll see the importance of really knowing yourself, knowing your user experience industry, knowing your user experience strategy, to ensure that its outputs are aligning with your values, aligning with what you want, and so that you can communicate to it what you want. So the question earlier, how do we ensure that it aligns with overall user experience strategy? Well, that's not the ChatGPT's job. That's your job to collaborate with ChatGPT properly to ensure that it understands you and that you understand yourself. And so it's really important to do inner work constantly, do work on why you're in this industry, do work on understanding your mission, so that you can ensure that AI aligns with you, aligns with what you're looking for in life, aligns with what you're looking for in your career, aligns with the user experience strategy. So this is another example. This is a bad prompt. This is a use case I did. I did several of these use cases when studying for this, of people who submitted me their outcomes that they were unhappy with. This prompt is missing specificity, missing unweighted language. It has unweighted language. Its goal direction is missing. It's missing illustrations. Its context clarity is missing, and assumption overload. There's too many assumptions being made. And this is, I did this prompt. I changed a few things, a little bit longer in the initial prompt, but I gave a goal. I gave the audience. I gave the tone I wanted. I had a specific audience, specific tone, specific goal, specific illustration, specific keywords. And I chose these keywords very specifically. And this is the output I got. It was too long to put in here the normal way because it outputted a long string of options for me. Right. And so this is just another illustration of how important it is, the difference, the contrast between responses. And so we're going to get to questions now. There's a few questions already in the question and answer area. There I see how can AI prompt engineering adapt to different user personas and diverse needs, right? So that's about kind of what we went over, that workflow, right? About understanding. Let's go back to that.
Where's the trick-or-treating happening? I'm with the sorority.
Oh, someone's mic is not muted, I think. That's about understanding your process, understanding your context, right? So you need to know the model, know its limitations, know that it's based on a certain training data, which is the World Wide Web. But the World Wide Web, it still has those biases in it, right? So understanding the model's biases, ChatGPT has so many biases in it, and over time working with it, you'll learn that. And so understanding the biases of the model you're working with, understanding its training data, understanding its limitations, understanding the context of what you're trying to achieve, all are about getting it to adapt to different user personas and diverse needs, understanding, aligning definitions, expectations. And the next question, what are some glossary of keywords we can use to help us to get better results? That's a great question. And I'm gonna get that full slide download. I will add a slide to the Figma presentation. To this, I'll add a slide here, and I will put a list of words that I personally use. But it's just about knowing the definition of the word you're using, right? About doing kind of some research and figuring it out and filling it out and kind of understanding the definition of the word that you plan on using and being intentional with your words, having weighted language. And you can actually ask ChatGPT to help you with a prompt. It's not necessarily the best at prompt engineering, but you can have a conversation with ChatGPT about what words mean, what the definition of certain words are, and you can help make your prompt better with ChatGPT. And as over time, it might become natural to you. You might become intuitive, and you might find words that you're drawn towards. Like I'm drawn towards concise, thorough, and comprehensive, but other people are drawn to other words, right? And it all varies. And you'll want to maybe make a key list of words that you use in your industry, words that you use in your world. You could ask ChatGPT for a list of keywords used in the industry that you're in with UX, right? So hopefully that helps. And the next question was, how many hours would you estimate you spent learning the black box? So I'm not much of an expert on the code side of things, the API, the back end of stuff. I'm not much of a coder. I'm more of focusing on the front end of ChatGPT, how you interact with it, how you prompt to it, how you speak to it. And a lot of that's understanding psychology, understanding communication. So I spent 10 years as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, listening to people's stories. And so I came in with a little bit of knowledge about how people communicate and understanding that people interpret things differently. People have different terminologies and different understandings and different meanings for things. Even though there's an official definition for a word, it might have a societal meaning in society that's different than the official definition. So understanding all of that has led to me being better at prompt engineering. You don't need to understand the black box of LLMs. You don't need to understand the API. You don't need to understand the code. You just need to understand the psychology of how ChatGPT works, the philosophy of how ChatGPT works. And this industry needs more and more philosophers, psychologists, and user designers, UX designers, user researchers to be able to create these interfaces more human-like, put the human element into these user interfaces. That's really important. So yeah, I mean, natural language is very technical. How people interpret actual language. And there's a lot of fights and arguments that are generated because there isn't enough context for people, or a lot of miscommunications between stakeholders and user designer and users, because that's why user X research is so important, because in UX research, you're eliminating assumptions. That's the whole thing about it, is you're eliminating assumptions. And so the whole UX process is this. Prompt engineering is the UX process. It's the UX writing process. It's all about designing something that isn't vague. And that's the same with your industry in general. So I personally believe that getting good at UX prompt engineering is getting good at UX writing, getting good at UX design in general, or at UX research probably more so. Yeah, I could create a dispatch table. Yep. And I know there were some submitted questions. So if we have the time, do we have the time for the submitted questions?
Yeah, we do have a few more minutes.
Okay. Before I get to that, you can go on, you can add my Discord. You can follow me on there and ask me questions on Discord. You can, here's the slide link again. This is a link tree, and you can find me on LinkedIn there as well. And those questions that were asked, let me pull those up. People can ask questions as well in the chat while I pull those up. Okay. So the first question that was asked, for which UX tasks can we actually depend on AI, and when can we not depend on AI? Well, the answer to this is nuanced, because it's not a question of whether you can depend on AI or not. You never want to depend on AI, I guess is the answer. But at the same time, you always want to depend on AI. It's a collaborative process of working together. It's a process of you inputting your input, and a process of the AI providing its input. It's like you're working with an intern or an assistant. Think of it like that. Think of it. I'm not saying to anthropomorphize AI. I'm not saying AI is human, right? That's a whole other philosophical debate. I'm saying that act as though you're talking to an intern or assistant. So as UX designers, what do I focus on when designing for AI products? Well, this is a great question, because there are going to be some fascinating UX trends that we're going to see in the near future. And I personally think there's going to be more of an emphasis on collaborative shopping, for example, collaborative e-commerce process, collaborative meal registration or registration for services, right? They're going to be collaborative chat journeys rather than forms. So a turn from having forms and more of having chat boxes is going to be a huge trend that I personally predict. But current trends that I'm seeing are side by side. So one trend is having your workstation on one side and the AI chat on one side. That's a current UX trend that some people are implementing. Another one is inline, where if you're like working with Google Docs inline, you can talk to ChatGPT while you're writing your essay. That's something that Google will soon implement, and that Microsoft will soon implement in all its tools. Another trend I'm seeing is LinkedIn has a really cool trend. I don't think I have time to get into it, but it has a magic button where after you've provided enough context, the button will work, but only after you've written. So it encourages a collaborative process. It also encourages you to provide context, because the LinkedIn magic button only works if you provided enough context. I think it's a fascinating function. So those kind of things, as UX designers, we should start to think about, right? We should think about how do we humanize interactions. We should think about how do we inspire clarity and transparency. How do we make designs intuitive? How do we provide user control, right? The next question is, and if we run out of time, you can let me know, what is one of the best futures to design AI products? What is the one best product future to design in AI products? I think you can do everything personally with a language learning model. So for when I go to do wireframes or prototyping, I have hour-long conversations with ChatGPT. It's a little bit of exaggeration. I have long conversations with Pi or ChatGPT about my brainstorming process, about what I'm thinking. I have them organize an outline of my wireframe. What do I need to do? Is there anything I'm missing? Is there anything I'm not thinking about? Is there any user that I'm not predicting? Is there any accessibility issues I should consider, right? It's acting as a bulletin board, as a notepad to not only write my notes down, because I didn't talk about this, but you don't have to type ChatGPT. You don't have to type. If you have the app, you can go on the app, you can click this button right here, and you can talk to ChatGPT. You can talk to it and just talk out what you're thinking. Talk out what's in your mind. Talk aloud. Usability testing. We're taught to get the customer to talk aloud. And I think as UX designers, we should practice that ourselves, even without ChatGPT. You should practice talking your process out loud. And so it can help with everything. Do I feel UX copy is one of the most important things in AI product design? I don't know what that exactly is saying. I think UX copy, as ChatGPT answered it. What UX topics can be covered? I'm not really sure what's being asked there, but you can cover, user A/B testing, sentiment analysis. You can get to analyze conversations to figure out what the person's intent was. I suffer from being on a neurospicy, being neurodivergent. So sometimes I'll paste in conversations and, hey, ask AI, what does the person mean by this? What is their intent, right? And it can do a sentiment analysis in that way, and get understanding and user feedback on scale. Yeah, so that's all the questions that were submitted, I believe. And if I didn't answer one correctly, you can let me know.
It looks like there's one more question in the chat. Any tips on using LLMs specifically for qualitative analysis? And how do you ensure reproducibility and reliability?
Yeah, so I use ChatGPT for this all the time. So not only will I use it before I send out a survey to kind of create a hypothesis of what my data might be, and to kind of generate some different likely outcomes and brainstorm, but I also use it after the survey process to do that quantitative analysis. So you got to keep in mind that LLMs aren't number machines. They aren't math makers. So they're not the best at doing math, but they're still really good at words, really good at metaphors, really good at translating data into different sources, translating data to text, to essays, and with data analysis, which I didn't go into, but data analysis mode, you can take your quantification of your numbers you got from your survey, your quantitative data, your quantitative analysis, and you can quickly turn that into a bar graph or into a line chart, or ask GPT, what is the best chart for this data? What's the best way to represent it? It won't be the best chart in the world, but it's great for your own personal process to be able to determine, okay, what chart should I use to demonstrate this data to my stakeholder? What chart should I use to help me understand it? And you can have a conversation about the data with ChatGPT to help you understand the data. So you can have a back and forth conversation about the data and be like, okay, I'm having a hard time understanding these numbers. Why do we think that these numbers are these way? Why do we think they answered this way? And so you can have that conversation. And ensuring reliability is just a matter of checking the work, matter of looking over it, making sure it's accurate to what you're looking for. So all making sure you have context, making sure you gave the AI to begin with a good prompt that really covered all the context that it needs to be covered. Yeah, I hope that answered the question. Let's see.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kyle.
Yeah.
I, for one, learned a lot from this presentation, and I hope all of you as well did. It was a really insightful presentation, a lot to take away. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here today and sharing all that great information with us. And thank you so much to the audience for asking such wonderful questions. We did, again, get a few of those questions through the Google form and all of the live questions as well. So it's really nice to see that all of you have turned out today. And just to let you know, we at the UX Student Club have several exciting events that are happening after this as well, and a lot of workshops as well that are lined up. So do be sure to stay connected with us for future opportunities and to expand your knowledge in UX design and share any thoughts that you might have as well. We're all here to learn, we're all here to grow. So it's been really great to kick off our very first session with Kyle here today. And if you have any other questions, do feel free to ask us, or Kyle has provided his contact information as well. So feel free to connect with him for further questions as well. But thank you all so much.
I also would love if you guys shared your conversations with me. If you wanted to share a conversation you have with ChatGPT, I'm really interested in doing more studies on different conversations and breaking them down.
Absolutely. And so again, thank you, Kyle, for your presentation. And we hope you leave here today with some fresh insights and this enthusiasm, at least that's renewed for the future of UX and AI. And we hope you have a really great rest of your evening and a really great weekend. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, UX Club. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
I'll stay on a little bit longer.